In this second video on creating a terrain inside of Unity, I want to show you how to create custom textures that will allow you to have a more realistic bumpiness on your terrain. And you can see I'm using one here that has some cobblestones. It's got a normal map. And if I hit play on my game and look around, I can see that those texture maps look a lot more realistic than the previous ones I showed you. So you've got some grass here with some dirt. You've got some cobblestones that have a little bit of shine on them. You've got some sand over here. And all of these textures I made as custom textures that are seamless textures that also have a normal map. So to create these textures, you're going to need to use some other programs such as Photoshop and Maya, so Autodesk Maya. And I'm going to show you how to create that bumpy texture as a normal map inside of Maya using a source that's going to be the color map. And you have to render that out as a normal map. For that, I'm actually going to use a bump map that I create inside of Adobe Photoshop. So you can find texture maps online. If I go to my browser, you can see that I actually used a texture from wildtextures.com, and it's this seamless pavement texture. And if you look at the about in terms of use on here, this is free to use. So there are different websites that you can go and find seamless textures, ones that will repeat with tiling. Here's another one from Independent Software that I used to create the grass and ground texture there. And the reason these are important, and you might also want to look on the Unity Asset Store for free assets. Check the free aspects under pricing, and you may find some texture maps there that actually have normal maps with them, or you can use them and create the normal maps like I'm going to show you how to do here. But you need a decent texture at least 2048 size. And the problem with the maps that we were using inside of Unity that come with standard assets, if we look at those textures, if you go into the environment, terrain assets, surface textures, all of these textures in here are just 512. 512 pixels by 512 pixels, so they're very low resolution, and they're not going to produce a very good texture map because they don't have the details. Even if I were to create a normal map for, say, this grass rock texture here, if I go to my terrain and I actually can take this grassy texture that I have that I just showed you that looks pretty realistic, and I were to replace it with that grass rock texture, and also take the normal map, and I created a normal map for that grass rock texture, it's going to look better than not having a normal map. So I've just replaced that texture, and if we look at what it looks like, if I look around, it looks okay. It doesn't look terrible, but it doesn't have the resolution And if you walk around and you look at it, it's going to look a little blurry because it's a 512 by 512 texture map, and it can't compare to the 2048 by 2048 texture map. If I replace it with that one, both in the color map and in the normal map, when I look at that, because the resolution is so much higher, it's going to look a lot more realistic and detailed, and it's not going to have the blurriness that the other one had, or the pixelation. So this is something that you want to try to develop some of your own textures for, in order to have this more clear, better looking surface textures on your terrain. So let's look at how you can do that. So to begin, I'm going to need to find some texture maps that I can use. And so I'm going to go to the web, and I'm going to go to places like wildtextures.com. This seamless pavement texture is one that I'm going to use. So they have a high resolution version of that I can go down and find and download it. I'm going to also go to places like Independent Software and use this texture map. You want to click into it, and then you want to right click it and save image as, and save it into a textures folder that you can use to open your textures inside of Photoshop to create a bump map on them. So I just created a textures folder in my class folder, and I will open them from there. So if I do that, I'm going to go to where I downloaded the texture, and I'm going to right click it, and I'm going to open with Adobe Photoshop. So inside of Photoshop, the first thing you want to do is check the image size under image size. And you can see that this one is 2048 by 2048 at 72 ppi, or pixels per inch. So that's a good size. Bigger than that is probably too big. You could do 4096 by 4096, but that's a very big 4K type of texture. 2048 by 2048 will look good in your game without being too gigantic. If you're trying to save on space, then you could bring that down to 1024 by 1024. 512 by 512 is a little small, and it works for some textures, but if you want something that looks really nice, you're going to want 1024 or 2048, probably at the largest. And when you open it, you're going to want to adjust it so that it's as uniform and sort of flat without any particular lighting in it. That makes the best kind of textures. You can see that I've also opened the Wild Textures image as well, and it also has a very flat, even lighting across the surface of the texture, and that's what you want. There's a few shadows in this one, but and if you are concerned about those, you can go to Image Adjustments and go to Shadows Highlights, and it will remove some of those, but if they're really dark, it probably won't remove them that much. And so if you pull the amounts up on these, you're going to have certain shadow areas and highlight areas that you can sort of even out that coloring on there, or the difference in values on that. You can adjust the tones and the radius a little bit, and it's going to pull that up or flatten that out. And also in the color area, it's going to make the color more intense. You may not want to do that if it's going to make it too colorful. And the mid-tone area, you could adjust that upwards if you want a little bit more contrast in the mid-tone area, or you could bring it down if you don't want that contrast there. So that's going to flatten it out. I use that a lot. And if I say OK to that, you're going to get an image that doesn't have too many noticeable lighting effects in it. You do want to look for certain areas that can be distinguished between sort of coming towards you and going away from you. So in this case, the brown of the dirt can be distinguished from the grass, which is above it and coming out. So you'd want the grass to come out more here and the brown dirt to go backwards in your bump map. So I would save this as my color map. You can do a file, save as, and you could just save it over the one that you downloaded if you want, or you could put the words color on there because it's a color map. And you can put them like at the end, like I did with the earlier one I did that I showed already. So I'm going to remake that. And so I don't want actually bump, I want color. And I'll save that as my new color map. And I'll go ahead and pull it all the way up. Now you can see actually how many megabytes this is going to take. And this is going to be brought in and repeated. So you probably don't want it to be too big. I could pull this down to like a quality of 10, which is still maximum, and it brings it down from almost 4 megabytes to 2 megabytes. And that's still going to be good quality. And it's a JPEG that I'm saving out. So I could say OK to that, and that will make it a little less computationally expensive when I'm applying it to my terrain. Now what I need is a bump map for this also, which is a black and white map. And I'm going to do that by opening up my layers on the right of Photoshop, and I'm going to duplicate my layer here. So you have the pancake symbol, which has all your layers commands in it, and I just did a duplicate layer. And I'm going to take that and work on it so that I have the original down here. What I'm looking for is to distinguish lightness and darkness between the brown area that is the ground and the green and white area, which is the grass. And I can do that by selecting the brown area. The more colorful it is, I mean, if I need to, I can go into image adjustments and go into saturation or vibrance, which gives me saturation and vibrance that I can increase, and I can make that even more noticeable. I don't want to use that on my color texture. I'm just trying to make sure that there's a difference in color pixels between the brown ground and the green and white grass. So if I go into my select menu and I select, I'm going to select by color. So I want to select by color range. And if I choose that, then I can go in and select some of the brown area. And I might hold the shift key down and go to another area that has the brownish orange in it and click again. So I'm trying to isolate the brown ground area from the green and the white grass. So I want to make sure I don't click on the green or white grass. And then you can adjust the fuzziness for how much you want that to actually grab. If I pull it too high, it's going to start selecting stuff in the grass. If I pull it down too low, it might not get enough of the brown ground. So I'm going to go and sort of just adjust that, looking back and forth between them to see what looks like a good amount of ground. And then once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and say OK, and I'll see it select that ground. And then what I want to do is, with that ground selected, I want that to get darker. So I'm going to go to an image adjustments, and you could use brightness contrast, you could use levels. I'm going to go and do hue saturation, and I'm going to use the lightness channel and just pull the lightness channel down. I'm not going to pull it all the way down because that's going to make it black. I don't really want it black, I just want it darker. So I'm going to pull it down and then say OK. And then I'm going to do a select inverse. And I want to pull the grass area. So I've just reversed the selection. So now the grass area is selected. And I'm going to go in image adjustment. And I'm going to go back to hue saturation again. And this time I'm going to pull the lightness up. So I'm trying to increase the lightness in the grass area and decrease the lightness in the ground area. I'll say OK to that and then deselect. And you can see that I got some of it, but some of it did not get selected. So I'm going to go back and do it again. So I'm going to select by color range. I'm going to try to select this brown area here that I didn't get last time, and maybe a little bit over here. Like so. Say OK, and then adjust that lightness down on those areas. And inverse my selection and adjust the lightness up. So going back between those two areas is going to pull out the grass area as a lighter area than the brown ground area. And if I want to increase that a little bit more, I'm going to go into either levels or brightness and contrast. I probably want to look at the levels actually. And I can see that the darks could go a little darker here. I don't want to pull them all the way over because I don't necessarily want it to be too dark. But the darks could be a little darker. And the lights could probably be a little lighter. And I could go also into just brightness contrast and pull the contrast up a little bit. And so I'm getting a very clear difference between the grassy areas and the ground areas. Now, this is not going to be a color map. I've already saved out the color map. And I can see the difference between these two is quite a bit. But what I care about is the bumpiness here, and I'm trying to make that grass look like it's sticking out. And then I'm going to go and I want to create a bump map out of this. So a bump map is actually going to be black and white. So if I go to image mode and I switch to grayscale, and I'm not going to flatten, but I do want to discard my layers or discard my color information. And I can see that in black and white, I can see a very clear difference between these two areas. So I'll go ahead and go with that. I think that's probably going to work out fine. If it's not quite enough, I could go back in and continue trying to pull up some contrast between those two areas. And when it's pretty harsh the way it is right now, but the filter in here that I'm going to use is under 3D, and it's for generating a bump map. And I'm going to do it on a layer. I found that it works best. Sometimes it fails if you try to do it on the background. So I'm doing it on a layer. And what I want to come up is a 3D viewer that will show me what this looks like in 3D. So this is the 3D viewer that I want to come up, and it's got a histogram with some different controls here for low, medium, and high. And the way I want to do these is I want to move them in such a way that it's going to emphasize the large changes. So where the grass changes to the ground. I don't necessarily want to see every little detail like this, because that's actually going to be very ugly in a texture map when it bumps it. So what I'm looking for is to try and move these three sliders in such a way that I emphasize the large changes and then have a little bit of fine detail there. So I'm moving these in such a way to try and retain a little bit of detail, but mostly see where the big changes are between where the grass is and the ground. And I want to be able to see that there's a difference there. And then I want some of the little grass pieces to show up too, but not too much, because then that actually gets kind of ugly on a texture map. So if I pull this up, it's towards those big areas, and then if I pull it down a little bit, it's going to add in a little bit of those grass details. And the same thing, if I pull this down, I get too many grass details. If I pull it up, I'm getting some of the larger effects. And here too, you can see that's a very obvious change. I just want a little bit of those grassy details in there. So that kind of has what I was looking for. And when I say, you could also go to your detail scale up here and adjust that up and down. Down is going to look less detailed. Up is going to look more detailed. I don't want too much detail, but I do want, I'm putting about 90% detail there. And I can orbit around and see what that's going to look like. And then if I say OK, this is what it ends up looking like. So it really doesn't look anything like what the original one that I did. It ends up blurring out a lot of the details and softening a lot of things. So this is my bump map. It's a grayscale map going between white and black. The dark parts are going to go backwards and look like they're recessed, and the light parts are going to come forward, and that's where the grass is. It would be hard to make this just by yourself because you don't know how to blur it in this way to get the kind of effects that you want. So you need to use something like Photoshop to do that. And then I'm going to do a save as, and I would choose JPEG, and I'm going to save as a bump. And I already have one there that I've done before. Let's just call this bump 2, and I'll save it. So when you save it, it's going to give you your image options. And because there's no color in this one, it's a very small file, so I could pull it all the way up to maximum 12, and it's still less than a megabyte. Okay, so having a little bit of a higher resolution on these images is probably better because I'm not using these directly inside of Unity. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring them into Maya, at least not the bump map. I'm not actually going to use the bump map in Unity at all. I'm going to go over to Maya, and you can see I've already got one done here where I created the bumpiness, and that's actually what's going to render out the normal map for use in Unity. So I'm going to redo this again so you can see how it's set up. Let's just go to a new scene. And I want to first show you, you have to create a project. So when you open Maya for the first time, and I'm using Maya 2019, if you're going to do a project where you're going to do several of these, you want to be able to save them into a scenes file of that project. And so you're going to go to File and go to the project window. And you need to, you can see I have a project called Game Assets that I've been putting this in. I'm just going to make a new one for the video here. Let's call it, I'll call it Game Assets Video Demo. So I hit the new button, I gave it a name, and I can click the little file folder here to find a place to put it. I would want this to be somewhere I can find it on the desktop, and I put it in my game design folder, my course folder. Select that, and you get that pathway there. It's going to create all of these different folders that are part of a Maya project. And when I save scenes, they're going to get saved in the scenes folder. And when I am looking for texture maps to assign to the geometry, I'm going to want to put them in the source images folder because that's where Maya looks for them. So I'm going to go ahead and accept this, and it creates the project with all the folders. And then what you have to do is you have to go to File again and go to Set Project. And the project that I'm in may be different than the one that I just created. So to make sure that I'm in the correct project, you want to go find the one that you just made and choose it. Here it is, Game Assets Video Demo, and hit Set. And then every time I go, if I go up to do a Save Scene As, and I'm saving as a Maya ASCII file that allows you to sort of change some things inside of it if you need to go forward or backwards in versions of Maya. But you don't usually do that, so you don't have to save it as an ASCII, but you could. It's just it saves a file that you can edit that the Maya binary doesn't. And it's going to automatically open to your scenes file, and then you can save it there. So I'm going to go ahead and name this something. Let's call this Texture Demo Video 1. Okay, so Texture Demo Video 1, I'm saving it. It's going to tell me I'm using a student version, and that's been saved. So to set this up, I am probably, when you first open Maya, if you haven't used Maya before, you're going to be in the modeling section. So all of these are context sensitive tools, so they change depending on what kind of mode you're in. So I'm in modeling right now, and if I switch to say rendering, you'll see that the menus change at the top here. So the toolbar that I have across the top here, that is on poly modeling, and that is what I wanted on if I'm going to create something to texture map. So I'm just going to create a simple plane, and you can see that there's a polygon plane right here in the poly modeling. You could also go to create polygon primitives and choose plane. Doesn't matter, whichever is easy for you. A lot of people just click these buttons to create your plane. And it's going to create it in the middle of your 3D world. You have your XYZ global axis in the lower left of your main 3D window here. If you hit the space bar, you can switch to your 4 views. Anytime you have a cursor in one of the views, if you click the space bar, it'll make it full size. I'm just going to stick with the 3D view here. On the left, I have an outliner, which I use quite a bit because sometimes you can't see things well in your 3D views to select them, and you can tell exactly what you're selecting, what kind of hierarchy you have set up on it. If you don't have an outliner there, then you can go to your Windows menu and open up an outliner by just going to right in the Windows menu. It's just as outliner. And if it opens, it's probably going to open like as a floating window like this. It might open as a floating window. And you can dock your windows by just grabbing where the name is, and whatever turns blue, you can dock it in there. And I actually docked mine right over here next to my manipulator tools. So it turns blue, and I let go, and it just docks it right in there. So these are my manipulator tools for when I have an object selected. If I have my cursor in my view and I hit F, it's going to frame that plane that I created and zoom in on it. You can also use your Alt key, hold the Alt key down and left mouse button to orbit, middle mouse button to zoom. Pressing Alt and the middle mouse button will allow you to drag, but it's kind of sensitive depending on the mouse you're using. And then you can also hold Alt down and use your right mouse button to zoom. So I'll be using that a little bit. And then on the left, you have a plane here, and I'm going to double click that in the outliner to rename it, and I'm going to name this source. So this is going to be my source texture, and there's going to be a target. What we're going to do is we're going to be rendering and baking the bump map and color map to a normal map on a separate piece of geometry. So there's going to be a target and there's going to be a source objects, and they're going to be the same. So the source object is going to have the main texture and bump map on it. And the way you do that, on the right here, you can see I have an attribute editor. Again, you may not have that. You might have just a channel box and your attribute editor. I have mine docked. I'll just pull it out. That you might have to go to Windows, General Editors, Attribute Editor to actually open up a floating window of that. And if you want to dock that, I usually dock it on the right-hand side here. So if I drag it down here until it turns blue right next to my channel box or below my channel box and let go, it'll dock it into the right side here. And you might want to use the channel box, and you might want to switch to the attribute editor. I also have Human IK, but you don't need that for this. So with the attribute editor turned on, to the far right of that, I can see there's a Lambert material on this object. I don't want that Lambert material. That's the default material that is placed on objects when they're first created. I'm going to go into my 3D view and right-click to get this menu. And then I'm going to go down in that menu until I see Assign Favorite Material. And I'm going to choose a blend. So I just created a blend, and it comes up in my attribute editor, but it comes up as separate from the actual object. So I'm going to go back and click on the object again, or drag a box over it to select it. And you'll see that the blend, it's now got the object selected. I can see the source. That's what I named it, source. And then there's a tab for the shape node of that source. There's the polyplane, which I could adjust the subdivisions if I wanted to. I don't really need 10 by 10. I could just adjust these back to 1 by 1. It doesn't really matter for this one. And then I have the blend. And the blend is what I want to add my textures to. I'm going to go all the way to the top. You have your different attributes here for the blend material. A blend is nice because it's got a highlight as well as a diffuse, which is the main color of the object. And the main color of the object is the first channel that comes up under your attributes. And to the right of that, there's a checkerboard. That's where you're going to assign the texture map. So I'll click on that. I'll get a list, and I want to choose File. I'm going to click into File. And once I do that, it's going to go into another area, another node inside of that blend, and there's a little file there next to image name, and I want to click on that little file folder, and I'm going to choose my image. Now you see it looks into the source images folder, and I don't have any source images there right now. I'm going to cancel that here for a second, and I'm going to go out and take a look at where my textures are. So my textures are in my textures folder, and I could use that, but if I want to save this project later on and have those textures in the project, then I actually need to copy these textures over to where they're actually located. So I'm going to do that. I'll go ahead and use the ones that I made a second ago, which was this ground with grass 2048 color and ground with grass 2048 bump 2. So I'm going to select those here and right click them and copy them. I'll just do a copy on them because I want to leave them here so that I have them somewhere if I'm going to back up all my original textures, or if I need to get to the original textures or something like that. And then I'll go over and find on my desktop. So I want to go to the desktop, my project, and I'm going to go find the folder that Maya looks in. So Game Assets Video Demo is the one that I created, and inside of that, that's my project. Inside it has a bunch of folders, and I'm going to go find the source images folder and double click in that, and you see there's nothing there except this 3D Paint textures, which really doesn't have anything in it. So I'm going to paste these right here in source images. Right click and paste them. So now I have those two textures there. I'll go back into Maya, and I want to, at this point, click on that folder again, and now they're there inside of source images. So I'll go ahead and click on the one that says color and open it. Now I don't see it in my view because I don't have textures turned on. So I need to go on the top of this 3D view. There's a bunch of symbols here, and one of them looks like a checkerboard. And I'm going to go and click on that, and you'll be able to see that texture in your view. Now, it may not have, you might want to go ahead and put some lighting in here so that you'll be able to see the bumpiness, because it's hard to see if you don't have any lighting. And if I go to this little light symbol, which turns on all lights, and you can also do it here, called Use All Lights, it's completely black. So there is no lights in this scene right now. So I'm going to go ahead and create a light, and you can do that under the Create menu. You can also go to Rendering, and there's a bunch of lights there. The little Rendering tab here on this toolbar. And the one I want is the ones that are straight arrows. That's your directional light. You can also go to Create, Lights, and choose Directional Light. So if I choose a directional light, you see it's kind of big, and it doesn't matter where you move it. If it's in your way, then go ahead and move it out of the way. I'm going to switch to the Move manipulator, which is on the left here. You can also, sorry, it's this one. You can also hit the WER keys to switch between your Move, Rotate, and Scale manipulators. So W is going to bring me to the Move one. And it's also these three on the left here. And I'm going to go ahead and if you hover over it, it might say something like Paint Selection Tool. It's actually the Move tool. And I'm going to move it, or Move manipulator, move it up. And then I want to switch to the Rotate one, and I'm going to rotate it downwards. So I just rotate a little bit like that, so that you can move it up a little bit more if it's in your way. But I want to be able to see what this looks like. Now I can see it's kind of got a yellow tone on it, and that's probably from the last time I created a light. I wanted a warm light, so it's remembering that. I'm just going to put it to a plain white. So I clicked on the color swatch and it pulled it over here to white. And so it's just a plain white light. I don't need to mess with the intensity or anything on this. So now I have the surface illuminated, but it doesn't have any bumpiness. If I hold my Alt key down and orbit a little bit so that you can see how the light reflects off of that surface, you see it looks like basically a tile that's flat, that has a very flat, sort of almost plastic looking surface. We don't want that. So we're going to go select this object again, the source object. I'm going to go to the blend again, and I'm going to go into my attributes and find where it says bump mapping. It's a little further down. It's got a little space next to it, and I'm going to go click on the checkerboard and choose File. And it's going to bring you to a bump depth. You actually have two tabs here. I'm going to switch to the File To tab. Click on the folder, and it'll open to your source images folder, and you want to choose the bump that you created. And then you can go back to that bump 2D1 tab that has the bump depth if you want to increase the bump. Probably you don't have to. I would go back into the 3D view and hold your Alt key down, orbit, so that you can see what it looks like on that surface. So you'll be able to see the highlights from the light with the bumpiness. And what I'm looking for is to see that there's a clear difference between the green grass and the brown ground. it's not going to look wet like this, not unless you set certain settings inside of Unity. It won't have this sort of shiny wet look. That's not going to come through on the normal map, but the bumpiness will. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it at a bump depth of 1. You could reduce that if it's too much bumpiness. If I pull this down, it's going to have less bump, and if I go the other direction, it's going to bump in the other. The green will actually go backwards and the brown will come forward if I go into the negative numbers. And if I go above 1, it's going to be much more bumpy, but that's probably going to look ugly. So you're going to get some really dark, weird shadows and stuff. So I'm going to leave it right at 1, the default. And I'll go back to the source object again. So that's fine. That's all I really need is those two things, the color map and the bump map. And I can go ahead and now create the normal map. So to do that, I actually have to have a second piece of geometry that's exactly the same as this one. I could duplicate this one, but it might duplicate some of the connections. So it's easier actually, since this is a default 1x1 plane, it's easier for me to just go back to polymodeling and just click the plane, create plane again. Now, if you want them to be exactly the same with this new plane that I have a new plane. And if you want to make this easy to sort of see each one without hiding them, I could Control H hide them, but then I got to select them to bring them back. You could switch over to your channel box area on the right, and there is a layers section and a display layers, and there's some symbols down there on the lower left that will allow you to create a new layer and assign something to it. So in the outliner, I'm going to double click this new plane and call it target and hit enter. And so I have a source and a target now. And then I'm going to select the source. You actually see it's weird. It actually stops showing the source, but it shows the target one. But I have the source one selected. It's a little confusing. But I've got the source one selected in the outliner. And I'm going to go over to my display layers, and I'm going to hover over them. And I want the one that says create a new layer and assign selected object. So it's the fourth one from the left. It's got a little dot on it, and I'll go ahead and click on that. And it creates a new layer, and it actually assigned that source object because I have it selected in the outliner. And if I double click it, I can call it source layer and save it. And then I can take the target one and select it and go over and find the little square with a circle, a blue circle on it for creating a new layer and assigning the selected object. Click it again, you'll create another layer, double click that layer, and I'll name it target layer and save it. So now they're actually on those layers. If I want to, there's a V visibility checkbox to the left of target layer and source layer. If I turn off the source layer, if I click the V on source layer, it will hide the source. And if I click the V on target layer, it will hide that layer. If I click the V on source layer again, it will bring back that. So you can hide and show each one using your layers over there. And since I'm going to do a lot of these, you're setting a template up that you'll be able to do multiple textures with. So when I create this target layer and source layer, I'm actually going to be putting different target images and sources in there. So we want to be able to do a file, save scene, and that's going to allow me to have a template that I don't have to do this every time I want to create a texture map with a normal map on it. I'll just use this to do it. So I've got my lighting, I've got my source, and I've got my target. So now I'm going to go ahead and take the target is perfectly fine the way it is. I mean, if I hide the source, you'll see it's just a plain flat plane, but it is a little different in that I did change in the attribute editor. If I go back to the attribute editor, and if I go into the shape of this target object, it actually does have more edges within the surface. So I want to actually go and find those, and it's going to be within your object's attributes, and it's on mine, it's the fourth tab over. So from the here's my target object, here's this shape node, here's a layer that was created, which I actually assigned it to, and then here's the original creation setting for polyplane 2, and you can see the subdivisions are on 10 and 10, and we changed that on the first one. So just to make them exactly the same, since this is a template that I'm going to continue to use, I'll go ahead and pull that down to 1 and 1. And now they're exactly the same. And if I continue right here, there's a little arrow that you can click because sometimes the tabs will go beyond the edge, and it'll show that I'm using Lambert 1, which is the default Lambert material. And that's fine, because we're going to replace that Lambert 1 with a new one when we render to this. So that's, you don't really have to change that. So I'm going to go and go back to my channel box, bring my source layer back again, and we have everything ready to do the bake to a normal map. So the way you do this is you're going to want to switch to rendering. So if you're on modeling, make sure you click and change your mode to rendering, because there is a menu item that says lighting shading, and inside of that there's something called baking transfer maps, and I want to use that. So I'm going to open that up, and it looks like this, and we're going to do a bake. You won't have anything in here, so when you come in here, I'm going to just remove this one. It's just going to look like this. So what I want to do is I want to select the source object in my outliner and find source up here. There's a source area and there's a target area. The source area might be collapsed. Find the source meshes area, open it up, and click Add Selected with the source selected in the outliner. And source shape comes in. And then I'll select the target one and click Add Selected under Target Meshes. Now it's already in there because I had it selected when I opened it, so it automatically loaded it in, but yours might not, so make sure you click it, and it needs to bring in the target shape. So we have the source shape and the target shape. I'm just using the defaults under that. I've got map 1, mesh, and 0 for search envelope. These objects are exactly the same, so I don't need to have any kind of envelope. Envelopes are for two objects that are slightly not quite the same. And I want to do a normal map, so I'm going to click on where it says normal. That's going to open up a little section for making a normal map or baking a normal map. And I want to make sure I tell it where to go. So I'm going to click on the little folder, or at least look where it's going to go. and it's going to go into my source images folder, which is fine. But I need to give it a name. So I'm going to call it the same name as these other ones, but I'm going to replace color here with normal. I don't put any spaces in my name, so ground with grass 2048 normal, and I'll save it. So don't overwrite your other texture maps. Make sure you put a name in there that's different, and mine has normal on the name. And it's going to be a JPEG. I am going to use a JPEG for this. That's going to be the smallest kind of file that's going to have decent quality. And then I am going to use a map space tangent space. I am including materials, and it says use Maya Common settings. I do have that turned on, and you need to open that up and see what it's set to. So the Maya Common output here, I've got it set to 2048 by 2048. That is correct for this sized image. When we were in Photoshop, we checked it. It was 2048 by 2048. We could switch it to 1024 by 1024 or 512 by 512 or 4096 by 4096. You see they move together because it keeps the aspect ratio. But 2048 by 2048 is correct. I'm using the defaults on the other ones, world space, medium, filter 3, and Gaussian for the anti-aliasing. So we'll go ahead and keep all of those things. I don't really need to open up the advanced options. Closest to envelope is what I have set in here, but I believe these are all defaults. And then I'm going to do a bake and close. And this is going to take some time. So because it's baking out all the bumpiness to a normal map that has 3 colors in it. Okay, now that the render is done, we can take a look and see what it looks like. So you can see that we have a bumpy texture here. If I select the other one, you can kind of see how that bumpiness looks. Now, it's not going to look wet like this. It's not going to have that shininess that's on this particular shader because it's just the normal map, and that other shininess is going to come from the shader inside of Unity. So we have this rendered out now, but it's not important that it's in here. You're not going to save or export out anything from in here. What you're going to do instead is look in your source images folder to see where that new normal map is, and you can see I've got a ground with grass 2048 normal map here, and it's got the red, green, and blue colors, and it has that purplish look. So that's the normal map that we want to bring into Unity and use in the terrain. So to do that, I would select these 2 textures to bring them in, and I'd copy them. And then I would want to go find my folder that it has all my textures for my Unity project. And so here is the My Textures folder. It's in my Assets folder of my Unity project that I'm working in right now. And you can see I've got some textures in there already, but I'm going to go ahead and paste these textures in. And once I do that, when I go into Unity, it's going to import them. And then if I look in that My Textures folder here, you should be able to find them in there. And you do want to click on them and just check their import settings to make sure that everything looks okay with that. This color map should be a default 2D texture. Sometimes I pull the ISO level up a little bit. It's a quality setting. I pulled this one up to 8. I'm using a 2048 map So the max size 2048 is what I would want to use here. If I was using a smaller map like 1024, I'd want to set that down to 1024. You see they go in 512, 1024, 2048, 4096. If I was using a bigger map, 4096, I would definitely want to set that here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that. And then I want to look also at the normal map and make sure it's set to a normal map. And this one is not. It says default. So I need to change it to a normal map. And then I'll also put an ISO setting to the same as I did for the color texture. I can see the max size is correct again. So I'll hit apply. Now once I have that, I can start, I can actually put that into my terrain tools and paint with it. But I'm going to go ahead and load up a different scene, the scene that I had from the previous video. So I'm going to go and open my scenes folder, and we'll load up that scene. And so here's the scene that I had from the previous video that we were creating our terrain in. And I want to go ahead and add this this texture to it to see what it looks like. So I was painting in here with the grass and rock texture, and that's not the greatest texture, so I might as well replace it with this new one that I have. I could just paint with this new one, but let's replace one that we already have. I'm going to go to my terrain first, and if I look in it, I can see here's the grass and rock texture. And I think this one that I just made is a better texture. I could also replace the regular grass here and leave the grass and rock. It's up to you. The grass and rock texture that I have, I did create a normal map for, and it just doesn't look that great. So I'll go ahead and add, or actually, since I have a normal map for that one and I don't have one for the grass, let's go ahead and change the grass one to this new texture that we just made. So I'll go ahead and click on the diffuse for this grass texture. And instead of using the grass hill, I'm going to use the new ground with grass. And you can see that it really is pretty different than the previous one, and the setting that I have for this grass is probably too big. I'll go ahead and also click on the normal map select and choose the normal map for that ground with grass as well. And I saw it change over there in my 3D view, and it definitely looks more three-dimensional. So I can decide if this is a good size that I have set here for it, which is 15 by 15 on the X and Y. And if we want to see that, I can just click my play. Let's take a look at where my FPS controller is. It's a little bit high off the ground, so that's why I'm seeing so much there. I'm going to go ahead and switch to move and bring it closer to the ground. I don't want it down in the ground. Make sure you don't do that. And I'll switch to the rotate manipulator, and let's just rotate around where we're looking kind of towards that plane there where the grass is. And I'll go ahead and hit play, and we can take a look at it and see if it's too big. So I'm looking around at it, and it does look a little harsh. It looks a little big. I probably want to change it. So let's go ahead and do that, we'll go back to the terrain, and I want to make sure I'm in the right paint tool, and then let's set that to be smaller. I think it's going to look better if I put it at least at 20, maybe 25 by 25 would be even better for that. And even maybe that's a little bit too big. Let's go with, or actually that set it bigger. Let's go 10 by 10. I want to go smaller, not bigger. There we go. That looks better. That's looking closer to the right size. We could even go maybe 7 by 7, a little smaller. And now that's looking much more like grass. And I could go into my smoothness and adjust that a little bit. You can see that it's really kind of very bright right now. So maybe if I add a little bit of that smoothness, it actually makes it a little bit darker. And the metallic also does that, but it's going to get wet and wet looking if I do too much of it. Let's try just a little bit and play it again and look around. It looks better. So I want to create a little road right here in the middle part of this this flat area. And to do that, I'm going to use my brush tool in terrain. Again, I'll go back to my terrain, and I want to switch my brush to raise and lower terrain. And I want to create a little road right through here, and I want to make sure that I put my opacity down to very, very low setting so that I'm not going to push it too much. I just want to create a little indentation and flatten out right there in this area. So we can try it. I'm using a round brush, and I don't want it to be too big. Let's just try right there. We're going to make a little road going right through here. So that went way too big. Let's just pull the opacity down a little bit more. Just get it really low. And try it again. Okay, so I want to press it down, so I'm going to hold the shift key down. Yeah, so that just gave me a little bit of an indentation there. Let's do it again. And let's take it a little further. Now we can actually see that there. If it's a little bit too much, we can switch to our smooth and make our brush a little bigger, and we can kind of smooth that area out a little bit. We probably want to pull our opacity up and soften that maybe a little bit. So we'll leave it like that for right now. And if I don't want the grass right there where the road is, I could switch to my grass settings and pick the grass that I think is in that area, and we could remove it by just holding shift and just remove a little bit of that grass right there. Maybe it's okay, it's on the edges there. And then we'll just go to our FPS controller, and I'm kind of looking right down that. Let's grab that and move that back a little bit so I can see where it is I'm going to be painting that road. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save this. And I want to create a new road texture, so a cobblestone road texture. And so I'll go into Photoshop, and this is the Wild Textures image that I downloaded. So the first thing I would do is, again, check the size, and this is really, really big. It's 300 ppi, it's 6,000 pixels. Really, for working inside of a game engine, you don't need more than 72 ppi. And when I put that to 72 ppi, it puts it down to 1440 by 945. That's actually that's a little lower than I want to go. So I could turn off. I could scale this down and just do like 2048 in one direction. But if I do that, I'm not going to have the square texture that is generally what you want when you're doing a terrain texture. So if I think these cobblestones will look fine if I square them up. So I could turn off my aspect ratio, my lock for that aspect ratio, and just type in 2048. I'm scaling the whole thing down from a very large image, so I shouldn't really get too much problems in the image by changing it to the aspect ratio from 2048 to 2048, because it's smaller than the original was anyway. So if I do that, this is what I get. And I'll go ahead and zoom in on that a little bit. And what I want to do is, I noticed some things about this texture is that there's some repeated patterns in here that are noticeable, like these little pink circles are noticeable, and these little lines are noticeable. I don't think the actual stones are that noticeable, but if you have something like that and you don't want to repeat it over and over again in your texture where it will really show up as possibly being a noticeable thing, then you could get your clone stamp tool and adjust your brush to a size that makes sense for whatever you're painting on. I'm going to use a soft round brush, and with the clone stamp tool I could clone some of this surrounding area on top of that, and get rid of, maybe leave one of these pink things but get rid of the other ones. So for instance, if I hold my Alt key down, it will change the symbol on my screen so that that is what I'm painting from. And so if I click over here, for instance, and click in the grout, and then I move over, I can just stamp that into the grout. Now, I do want to pretty much cover this up entirely, so I'm going to pull my opacity and flow all the way up. And then I'm just going to stamp it once. And you see that just gets rid of that. And I can pull from grout anywhere. I can pull way up here to down here. And maybe I'll leave this one in the lower left. And then maybe I'll pull some grout from up here down to right there, or maybe right here, which is the same type of texture that I'm going over. So I basically got rid of 3 of those little pink dots that are there. And then the lines, I could do the same thing. I could just click up in the stone that this is on and just maybe paint a little bit, and get rid of different parts of those lines so they don't look the same. You know, maybe get rid of a little bit of this one. Maybe I get rid of all of this one, except one in the lower corner there. So as I go through, I'm sort of just taking parts from this stone, and I'm going to just get rid of and break that line up so that, and maybe, you know, maybe I don't want to do that for all of them. Maybe I want to keep that line in some of those places, or keep one of them that goes all the way and get rid of some of the other ones that are too similar to that. So there I've gotten rid of, you know, all of the line on that particular one. So that just makes it so that those patterns aren't going to be noticeable in the final texture map. And then I need to save this out. So this is my color map. I should go ahead and do a save as, and it's going to be saved into my textures folder as the, let's just call it Cobblestone 2048, and this is my color map. And save it. You see I've got one already in there that I did. This one is slightly different, but almost the same. This is what I'm gonna go ahead and save that. Actually, let me save as again with JPEG. I'm gonna overwrite it, and I'm gonna overwrite it because I can pull this down a little bit. Again, I'm looking at the size, and it was really pretty big. 7.9 megabytes. And if I'm actually going to use that for the color map, then it's a bit big. I probably want to bring this down to 10, so it's not quite so large as a map inside of Unity. And even that's kind of big. If I have a lot of these, then that could slow my game down, so I might want to bring the quality setting down even further. So the important thing now is I need a normal map for this, or I need a bump map that I can make a normal map with. So what I'm going to do is go into my layers. I'm going to duplicate it. So I'm working on a second layer. And then I'm going to go ahead and try to isolate the grout from the stones. And so if you got some color in your map like this, then like I did with the last one, I'm going to go and try to pull that color up. So I could go to vibrance or hue saturation and just pull that saturation up and really try to bring out the purple and blues in the stones as opposed to the orange in the grout. And that'll make it so that I can go into select color range and really try to isolate that grout by clicking on the orange areas. So I'm clicking on the orange areas, trying to get the grout mostly coming up with that. You see when I clicked on that one, I got some of the actual stones there. So I might want to undo that and go back. I did a Control-Z undo and go and hit a different color. And that's getting the grout pretty well. I could pull this to try and maximize that a little bit. And then I'll go ahead and say OK to that. And then I'll take that grout, and I want it to go away from me, so I'm gonna go to hue saturation. I'm gonna pull the lightness down on it. I'm gonna say OK to that, and we can inverse that. So we'll go to select inverse, and we'll go back to our hue saturation. We'll pull the lightness up. Say OK to that. Deselect. Okay, it's not quite what I want. I need to work on it maybe a little bit more. So I'll go back to select color range, and let's see if we can hit some of that blue in the stones. Okay, so the grout's pretty black there. The stones are pretty white. Let's say OK to that. Let's adjust the lightness up a little bit on those stones. I don't want to take it all the way to white because I do want some variations in that. And then I'll inverse my selection and go back into hue saturation. Let's pull the lightness back down. I can see again, I don't want to go to black because I want it to go back, but I want there to be some variations. I want to pull it all the way down to black. So when I deselect that, I can see that I'm starting to get some difference there. And we could go in and just try some other things like levels or brightness contrast is a simple way to do it, where it's going to increase the contrast between those two areas. I wanted a little bit extra contrast before I actually go into doing the bump map because it's going to blur it out. And so having a little extra contrast at this stage is fine. If I look at the difference between the original and this one, there's a pretty good difference in the values on that. So let's try that. I think that might be okay. I'll go ahead and if we want to make sure that the color is not sort of, because values are really what matters here, we can go ahead and switch our mode to grayscale, and we don't need to flatten it here. Just discard the color, and we can see that there is some difference, but not as much as when we were looking at it in color mode. So, I mean, I might want to go in and, you know, check my levels, maybe pull the edges in a little bit to try and maximize that. So I think that's fine. Let's try it. I'm going to go ahead and go to Filter, 3D, and I want to go to Generate a Bump Map. And hopefully the viewer will come up and show me what this is going to look like. Okay, so I can see, if I can see the individual cobblestones, then it's a pretty good bump map happening. That's what I want. And again, I want to adjust these so that I sort of maximize that sort of large features of the stones without having too many little teeny harsh little details. I want a little bit of that stone texture in there, but I don't want all these teeny little details. They'll just look ugly when I get in there to Unity. So that's what the blurring is going to do. So the way I set these is how it's going to blur the map. So I want a little bit of those details. I don't want to remove them entirely, but I'm mostly interested in seeing the individual cobblestones. And so that looks pretty good. I'll go ahead and say OK to that. And you can see it really blurs it out. It doesn't look hardly anything like what I had before, but we'll go ahead and save that. And we'll do a save as. And we want to switch to JPEG. And I'm going to save that into my textures folder as the bump map. And for this one, I'm just going to pull it all the way up because I'm not even going to use this in Unity. I'm just going to use it in Maya. So I want the best quality possible, and I'll say OK. And then if you want to make it easy on yourself, you can move those to your source images folder so they're easier to find. So if these are find your textures, so they're in my textures folder, and the ones that I just did was this these two right here. I'm going to go ahead and shift select those, Control C, copy them, and we'll take them over to the source images folder and paste them. So now that they're in my source images folder, I can go into Maya, and I'm just going to replace this one that I have. So I can use the planes that I have, my source and my target planes. The source, I don't actually, I've got my channel box with my layers down here, and I can hide the source for a second here so that I won't accidentally select it. And I do want to select this target object, right click it, and assign a new fresh blend material to it. So it's blank. And then I want to go to my source and go back to our channel box and turn our source layer back on. And we can hide the target layer for right now, so we can just work on the source layer. And for my source, I want to go to my attribute editor, find the blend, and just replace the color map that I have and the bump map that I have. So the color map already, I've got the blend one here on the source. It's the last node on my attribute editor. The color channel is using this map right now, this grass map. So I'm going to click into it and click on the folder. It's going to take me to my source images folder, and I'm going to click on the cobblestone color instead and open that up. And you see it doesn't look right because it doesn't have the right bump map on it, but let's go find where the bump map is, which is right here. Sorry, select the source object again, so you go to the top level of the shader, and it's right here, bump mapping. Click on the far right little arrow, and it brings us to here where we've got the folder, and it shows me that I'm using the other grass bump map, and I want to use the one for the cobblestones that we just made. And now I can see that that's a much nicer, it's got some nice shine, it's got some bumpiness. That's what I want. So let's go ahead and bake that. So we'll go up to our, we'll make sure that we're switched to our rendering mode so that we get the lighting shading, and we're going to open our transfer maps. I do want to make sure that I can see them both. In the channel box, I hid the target layer, so I'm going to bring it back by clicking the little V on it. It's there, it's going to be blank. So I select things in my outliner because that way I know that I have them selected when I'm loading them in to this transfer maps. Make sure you open up where the target is in the source and go ahead and select the source and click Add Selected. So it says Source Shape, and then the target, and click Add Selected where it says Target Meshes, and it says Target Shape now. And with those two in place, I can just use the one that I already set up. The only thing I want to change is the name of the output map for the normal map. So click on the little folder. I want it to go to my source images folder, but I want to give it a new name. So we'll just click up here on the cobblestone bump map, and we'll change that to cobblestone 2048 normal and save it. Now the path is going to my source images folder, and it's going to create a image file called cobblestone 2048 normal, and all the other settings are going to be the same. JPEG. If I open up my Maya Common Output section, 2048 by 2048 is what I want. It's using tangent space, all these same settings. So when you set this up once, you can kind of make sure you save it as a Maya file, and you can use this for producing your normal maps. It's a template. And then I'll just do a bake and close and wait for it to finish. Now it's going to take some time, so I'll go ahead and skip to when it's done. Okay, we can see that it's done, and the texture map is there on the target. If we click on the source, we can see that it's got the bumpiness to it, and if we switch out to the source images folder, we can see there's a new cobblestones 2048 normal texture there. So I would like to now go ahead and shift select those and copy them. Just Control C or copy, and we'll go over and paste them into the folder that's in my game assets folder, so my textures folder. So we'll go ahead and paste those in there, and we now have a couple new cobblestone textures. They are a little different than the one that I did earlier, and we'll go ahead and try that. So I see those importing into the scene, and we created a little area here that we're going to paint this into. So let's just orbit around so we can make sure that we hit that when we paint. And I'll go ahead and go to my textures folder so we can check those textures. You need to make sure that they're set up correctly. So the ones that I want here are called cobblestone 2048 color. That one is correct. I'm going to set the ISO level up to 8 and apply it. And then I'll do the same thing for the normal map, cobblestone 2048 normal. I'll set the ISO level up, and I'll also switch it to a normal map. It's important you do that. You'll get an error message if you don't switch that. Let's go ahead and apply it. And then I'll go ahead and assign it in my terrain editor. So I want to go to my paint textures. We're going to edit terrain layers. We're going to create a new layer, and I want to use the cobblestone textures that I just brought in. So this is the color one right here. Go ahead and select that, and then I'll make sure I select it and click where it says normal map select, and we also want to grab the normal map for that. So with those loaded up, I can go ahead and paint that along the area that I was carving out earlier. And I want to check my paint settings on that, and I also want to check my size. I know 2 by 2 is going to be way too small, so let's just put in something like, let's do 10 by 10 to start, and we'll make it bigger or smaller depending on what that looks like. And in my brush settings, I got a pretty good size of brush. I don't want to, maybe I do want a pretty high opacity, but we'll bring it up to maybe halfway to 40%. And then I'll go ahead and paint down that line. And I can see that it's way too big. It's looking way too big. So let's go ahead and set that down to like maybe 5 by 5. That's looking better. So I'm painting a little bit here along the surface. And we'll go ahead and take a look at what that looks like by hitting play. Okay, doesn't look bad. So, I mean, you might want to, work on the edges of where the cobblestones are so that they look pretty good over here on this side, but on this side they're kind of blending a little too much with the grass. So you could add some roughness in that area so that's like an edge. And then I should probably go ahead and continue flattening out my road. It looks pretty good in this area, but it doesn't look good in some of the other areas where it's much less flat. You wouldn't have a cobblestone road, probably unless there was an earthquake looking like that. So I think the size is pretty good right now. The other thing that I would want to work on here is the smoothness of it. It might look too shiny or too light. You might want to pull the smoothness up a little bit to reduce maybe a little bit of that shininess. Or you can even add a little metallic on it. If we wanted sort of wet looking cobblestones, we could add a lot of that, but adjusting these a little bit might help to create a better look, a more realistic look on those cobblestones. If you don't want them to be too light colored. And we could do other things. We could adjust the specular if we had a sort of warm sunlight. We could go in and adjust the specular color there. I mean, probably in the case of this particular material, the specular doesn't need to be any sort of bright color, but we could maybe make it a little bit warm colored if we wanted some warm highlights coming up where the light hits those cobblestones. And whether that shows up or not will really depend on your other settings too. So I think that looks okay. That's giving me some bumpiness there. And then the last one that I wanted to show you is how you can make a custom texture map that from one of your images. So this is an image of some sand, and you can see that's actually got my feet in the bottom of it that I'm going to want to remove. But I was shooting this on a beach straight down towards the sand, and it has a little bit of shadows, but not too much. So it's going to produce probably a decent texture. So in order to actually use this, this is not tileable. It's not repeatable as it is right now. So I have to make it tileable and repeatable, and I have to maybe adjust the lighting and everything and cut off my feet. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my feet out of there. I'm going to take my square selection tool, and I'm going to try to click right up in the corner. If you want to make that a little easier, you can pull out a couple of guides. If your guides aren't on, make sure you have under view that you have your rulers turned on and you have snap turned on. And I could pull out a couple of guides just to snap to with my selection tool. When I hold shift down, it's going to snap right into the corner, and then it's going to pull out a square. So I'll go to the other side until I see purple and let go, and now I know I have a perfect square. And that's going to cut my feet off, so I'll just do an image crop to cut those feet out of there. And I could go back to my move tool and pull those back out of there if they're distracting me, and the guides, and then I'll deselect. So now I have a circle, or sorry, a square, and I need to check the size because I shot this image. I don't remember what size it is, so I'm going to go to image size, and I see it's 3024 by 3024 72 resolution. So that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and make that 2048. And you'll notice that I don't have my lock for aspect ratio on. I turned it off in the last one we did. But on this one, I want to leave that on so I don't have to type this in twice. I'll go ahead and type in 2048 with the lock on, and the other one will automatically change to 2048, and I'll say OK. So now I've got a 2048 texture, and I'll go ahead and view and fit that on screen. So what I want to do to make this tileable is I want to go in and shift it halfway. So half of 2048 is 1024. And so what I'm going to do is I need to do this both vertically and horizontally. And to do this, I'm going to go to Filter, Other, and I want to offset. Now, if you don't want to, if you want to leave your original there so that you can get back to it and check it, you might want to duplicate your layer for this. That's always a good idea. And then I'll do the offset. One other thing I might do before I do the offset, or I could do this at the end, it probably really doesn't matter, is I could go in and try to remove some of these shadows. But I'll do that at the end. Let's go ahead and do the offset right now. So I'm going to go to Filter, Other, and I'm going to do an offset. And the offset I want is going to be half of 2048. So that's really, I'm going to put 1024. So if I type in 1024 and hit OK, and it's doing it, so you have to choose whether you want vertical or horizontal. So I just typed it into vertical because that's the last thing that I did with this, and it came up in that particular channel. It doesn't matter. You could do horizontal first, but I'm going to do vertical. I wouldn't do them both at the same time just because it's a little harder maybe to see if you do it both at the same time. I don't know. We could try it. If I put 1024 there, then it's actually going to do both. And so I guess you could do that, right? That's fine. Let's try it. I usually do them one at a time, but let's try it. So I'll hit OK. And what you're going to see is there's a line down the middle and in both directions. So that's the vertical and horizontal lines. And I need to get rid of those. I need to use my clone tool, my clone stamp tool, and probably make my brush a little bigger. And I might want to use 100%, or I might want to use just a partial amount. It's up to you. But I want to go in there and I want to remove these lines by cloning from different parts of this image. And sometimes I would just do it, say, from right around that area, and then go in and hit a few from different areas. So, for instance, let's say I don't put this all the way up so I can blend it a little bit. And I'm going to hold my Alt key down, and I'm going to do the horizontal part right here and just hold slightly above it and then go slightly down, straight under it. And then I'm just going to clone across there like so, like that. And then I'm going to do it the other direction, from down up. Okay, and then I can do it all the way across. Normally I would do it all the way across because I usually do these one at a time. But I'll go ahead and do the same thing on this side, all the way out. And I did twice there. You might just want to do once across and then switch to the upper part, and then do once across there. And then the same thing vertically. I'm going to hold the Alt key down. I'm going to go straight on one side, and I'm going to go all the way up like so. And then I'm going to hold the Alt key down on the other side and go all the way down on that side. And then what I'll do is I'll put these up to 100%. And I'm going to just look at the areas that I think look a little bit too soft because I'm blending it. And I'm going to find some areas that are similar and choose those areas in the quadrants here. And like this one, there's two of the same kind of thing right there. I'm just going to, and you might want to go even far away, like all the way up here, and click a little bit there. And then for this one, maybe I'll go down here somewhere or over here. Click there and replace that part right there. So that way I'm kind of smoothing it out a little bit. I'm putting something that's sharp from a completely different area into that spot to create a little bit of variation there that's going to make it harder to notice that it's actually been cloned. And I only need to do it in the places where there is a seam. So I'm looking specifically in the areas where there's seams. And if there's a shadow area over here, maybe I'll go and find another shadow area and add a little bit to make that continue that look. So that's kind of got much of that covered now. I can go ahead and maybe do a little bit there along the edge so I don't forget to sort of hit that. And we can just do it kind of quickly. And that should be fine. Now that doesn't look good because that's too obvious, but let's do that. Okay. All right, so that should remove a lot of that, and then a lot of those seams, and then I need to put it back to the way it was. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to filter and other and offset, and it might be fine to put plus in there, but since I moved it plus, just to make sure, I'm just going to put minus, and that'll put it exactly back to where it is. I think it's the same actually, but I'll hit OK, and now it's back to where it was as the original texture, but now the edges are seamless. And the last thing that I would do in here is I go, if I like it the way it is, and you can see that if I click the visibility of that layer, you can see all of the work that I did was around the edges of this. And I'm going to go ahead and merge that down. And then I want to go to image adjustments, and I'm going to go to shadows highlights. And shadows highlights is going to allow you to remove some of the lighting that's causing deep shadows. I don't really want too much of that. I might bring highlights up a little bit, but mostly it's going to be the shadows that I'm trying to make a little less intense, like so. I might, it is pumping up the color a little bit on this. If that looks fine, then you could leave it. If not, you might want to pull that back. I think it looks fine actually on this one, so I'm going to leave a little more color in it. And the midtones, we can, that's going to actually increase the shadows. So we don't want too much of that. And you can see that when I turn it on and off, when I turn preview on and off, that it is sort of removing some of the variations a little bit there. I'll say OK to that. So this is my seamless sand texture color map. I'll go ahead and save as. We want to save it as a JPEG, and we'll call it sand. I'll just give it a different one than I had for the other one that's the same. So let's say sand beach color, and we'll save it. And then I'll bring it down to like a 10 to make it a little bit smaller. So the other map that I need is the bump map. So I'll go ahead and go through the same process. I'll duplicate the layer, and we'll pick what we want to be lighter. So in this case, there's not that much difference that we're going to see here. I want it's almost like I don't even have to do much to this one. But I probably would like some things to come out more than others here. So let's just go ahead and try We could just try a map as it is, but probably at least I would want to go in and try to bring something up a little bit more than just the default. So let's go ahead and we'll do a color range, and let's try to pick something light there, like a light sand part right there. And that'll be the part that we want to really come out a little bit more. And it's going to be over a lot of the surface, so we'll say okay to that. And then we're going to go and pull the lightness up a little bit on that. And we'll inverse that selection and pull the lightness down. So if I deselect that, we can see that it does have some variations now. I might want to go in and do a little bit more brightness contrast or something like that to accentuate that. And I'll leave it at that. I think that's probably fine. That's certainly got more contrast than the original. So let's see what that would look like as a black and white image. And I think it looks okay. Let's go ahead and go into filter, and I'm going to do generate a bump map. And there's what it looks like. And it does look like I've got some bumps. I, again, don't want too many teeny little thing. I don't need every grain of sand showing up. I mostly want to see a little bit of that sand showing up, and the main parts are the bumpiness of the sand and the footprints and stuff like that. So we'll go ahead and say okay to that. That's what our map ends up looking like. Let's do a save as, and we'll save as a JPEG. And we want to save it as the sand beach bump. Full size, say okay. Excuse me. I'll head into Maya now. We'll go through the same process one more time. Let's take the source. I'm going to hide the, I want to select the target and hide the source. I'm going to right click the target, assign a favorite material blend, so it's just a nice flat blend. Then I'm going to go to the source, going to bring back my visibility on my source, and we'll hide the target while I work on this texture map here. I'll go into the attribute editor, find the color channel, which is at the top, click into it, click into the folder, find the texture map that I want to use. Now, I forgot to copy it into here, so let's just do that real quick. It's right now in my textures folder. I'll go and find it. It's the sand beach color and bump one here. Let's just copy those, Control C, go over to your source images folder, which is in your Maya project, and paste it. Then inside of Maya, when I click on the image folder, it's going to be there, and I can choose the color map and open it. And then it's not going to look right, so I'll click on the source over in my outliner again to go to the top level of the shader, and then I want to go into the bump mapping channel and click on this folder and choose the bump. And I can see that we have some sand looking material. It looks like wet beach sand because of the shader in here. It won't necessarily look like that inside of Unity when we bake it to the normal map. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to make sure I'm in rendering, lighting, shading, transfer maps. I'll make sure that I have both my maps visible in my channel box layers. I turn them both on with the V. And then I'm just going to use my outliner to click on each one to load them in to my transfer maps. Make sure you open up the source meshes, select the source, add it is selected. It should say source shape. Hard to say that fast. And then do the target and add it. It should say target shape. Then we already have the normal map set up. I just need to give it a name by clicking on the folder, and inside of here I'm going to choose Sand Beach Bump and change the bump part to normal for the name. I don't need to put .jpeg or anything. It's saving out of JPEG anyway. I'll hit save. I've got a correct pathway there now. Everything else is going to be the same as what I've done before because I've been using the same size maps, 2048. So that stays the same in my Maya Common Output. JPEGs, everything stays the same tangent space for the map space. And then I'll go ahead and bake and close. And as soon as that's done, we'll take a look at it in Unity. All right, it's done. So we'll take a look at this. We can see that it baked it, and we can look at what that looks like. And we'll go ahead and go over to our source images folder, and we can see that we have the beach sand normal there. And we'll go ahead and select that, Control C, copy it, go over to our Unity textures and paste it in. Then we'll go into Unity. We see it got imported. So that one's the sand beach texture map that I have here. We'll set the aniso level up to 8 like we did with the other one, and we'll apply it. And we'll do with the normal map, make sure it's set to a normal map, and we'll set the same aniso level and apply it. Then let's go ahead and try to paint it on our terrain. So we'll add or create a new layer. Let's go find that sand beach. And there it is. We'll pick it. And select it. Select the normal map that goes with it. And then we need to set a size on it. Probably 2 by 2 is too small. Let's try 10 by 10. That might be too big, but we'll try it. And then make sure that you set your brush size and opacity. I'm actually going to do this along the edges of my road here, so let's try that. I'm going to go right along the edges, and maybe where this grass is here, if it's some grass, maybe that's some sandiness that's there. So let's go ahead and try to paint that a little bit in there, and we'll add some of that over in that sandy area right on the side of the road here. Okay, I can see that it's kind of big. Probably I'm going to want to reduce the size of that a little bit. So we'll go ahead and set that down. Let's try half of that size, like 5 and 5. And then we'll just take a look at it. It also looks kind of shiny, so I might want to change it a little bit. It doesn't look bad, but it looks a little shiny. So again, those are settings that you can do inside of the shader. Here, the smoothness setting is going to reduce that down a little bit. I don't want to go too far because it'll actually make it more shiny and look wet if I add too much of that. Let's just add a little bit of shininess, a little bit of metallic, and take a look at it again. I think I can see a little bit of a seam there, so probably I should work on that some more inside of Photoshop. But it's not bad. It's tiling pretty well. So, and probably I would want to go back and forth between that road texture and the sand, and try to make some of the parts of the road a little bit stronger there to mix it in a little better. So that's how you make your custom textures, how you can make them from things that you get from the internet and also things that you get from your own photography. So that's probably the nicest thing, is that you can go in and you can do your own photography for this